about God and his mission. We're going to talk just right now about God's mission. And when you're on mission for something, you have an end vision of what you want to see. Does anybody know what Habakkuk 2:14 says? Burke doesn't count. Who else? Somebody tell me. Right, so the earth will be covered with the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the seas. Can you separate water from the sea? God's end vision is that his glory will not and cannot be separated from this earth, just like the waters cover the seas. Is it there yet? Can you say that every corner of this earth displays the glory of God? No, but that's his end vision. That's what he's after. So how do we get there? What's our goal? What's Matthew 24:14 say? So it says, after you have preached the gospel to all the nations, then what will happen? Then the end will come. That's our goal. We've got to get this gospel to all the nations, to the point where there is no place left. Everyone has heard, right? Okay, and so how we do this is in Matthew 28:18 through 20. Who knows what that says?
Go make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And surely I am with you always, to the very end of the age.
Excellent. Good job. So God's mission is that his glory would fill this earth. And we do that by sharing the gospel with every nation. And the command is to go. You have to go and make disciples in order to realize that goal, right? Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about God's mission. Genesis 1:26 through 28. You guys can turn there. And if someone could just stand up and read that for us. Genesis 1:26 through 28. This is going to be a participatory session, in case y'all haven't noticed. Excellent, Barbara. Thank you.
26 through 28.
Yes.
Then God said, let us make human beings in our image to be like us. They will reign over the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, the livestock, all the wild animals on the earth, and the small animals that scurry along the ground. So God created human beings in his own image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them. Then God blessed them and said, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and govern it. Reign over the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, and all the animals that scurry along the ground.
Thank you. So God spoke to this man and woman that he had just created, and he told them to multiply, right? He set them in rule over everything he had created, and he said, multiply. Well, we hear that, and we typically think mainly of physical reproduction. Okay, they were supposed to have children, and the lineage would go on. But this is Genesis 1. The fall has not occurred yet. So these were people that were connected to God on a spiritual level. They were created in his image. They were his image bearers. So not only physical reproduction and multiplication, but they were to multiply his image, multiply his glory. Because as they had children, those were going to be little image bearers. And then they were going to have children that were going to be image bearers. And that image, that glory, was going to fill the earth. That was his goal in Genesis 1. That's his goal in Habakkuk 2:14 that we just talked about. His whole intent was to multiply his image, be image bearers. Okay, so what happens though in Genesis chapter 3? The fall, right? That multiplication becomes contaminated. Because that relationship with God, that spiritual side is now broken, right? When sin enters in. And it gets so bad that in Genesis chapter 6, verse 1 and verse 4, we read that men are multiplying evil. It says, every thought of their heart is wicked. Every. That's like all-encompassing. So God's image was not being multiplied. Evil was being multiplied. And so he set the reset button. He pushed that little reset button with Noah and the ark. He took the one righteous man in that generation and took him and his family into the ark and destroyed everything else. Said, okay, we're going to reset this. Okay? And so then, if you look at Genesis chapter 9, verse 1, Noah and his family comes out of the ark, and what does God tell them again? Be fruitful and multiply. Okay, Act 2. We're going to try this again. Multiply. I'm starting with the righteous. That was the only one righteous that I could find in that generation. Let's restart. Multiply. Multiply my glory. Multiply and fill the earth. But instead of God's name being renowned, instead of multiplying God's glory, when we get to Genesis 11 and the Tower of Babel, we read in verse 4 that now man wants to make his name great. God who? Whose name are we supposed to be concentrating on? God wants his name to be great. But man goes right back down into making his name great. Let's not worry about God. I want you to do an exercise at your table, though, where we're focusing on God's mission. And you can make a chart. And in these verses, I want you to look at the extent of the promise, or of what God wants done, and who he uses to accomplish that. Okay? So, I'm going to write these up here, and y'all can start discussing them. Okay, Genesis 12, 1 through 3. I slipped that one in there because I forgot to write it in. What was the extent of God's mission that he gave Abram here?
All the families of the earth.
All the families of the earth. Yep, that's pretty inclusive, isn't it? And who was he going to use to reach all the families of the earth? Abram, right. And his children, that's right, because he was going to multiply. Yeah, that's good. Abram and following, FF. Exodus 19, 5 through 6. What was the extent? Who was going to be touched by what God said here? all of the earth, all the peoples, right? And who was God going to use in this passage? Israel. The Israelites here. What did God call them in this passage? The chosen people and a kingdom of priests. Now, what do priests do?
They speak to God on behalf of the people.
Right. Yes. So they are that mediator between the people and God. They speak to God on behalf of the people. They're reconciling that relationship there, right, between the people and God. Okay, this is interesting. Exodus 20, 18 through 21. Do I have one person that would want to speak into the mic and share that passage with us? Exodus 20, 18 through 21. Somebody raise your hand. Okay, let's get the mic to you so that we get it on the table.
Thank you. Just hold it right there.
There you go.
Thanks. Exodus 20. Isn't Kayla a sport? You said 18?
Yes, 18 through 21.
Thank you. When the people heard the thunder and the loud blast of the ram's horn, and when they saw the flashes of lightning and the smoke billowing from the mountain, they stood at a distance, trembling with fear. And they said to Moses, "You speak to us, and we'll listen, but don't let God speak directly to us, or we'll die." "Don't be afraid," Moses answered them, "for God has come in this way to test you, and so that your fear of him will keep you from sinning."
And 21.
Yep.
Yep.
As the people stood in the distance, Moses approached the dark cloud where God was.
Okay, thank you. So God called these people, "You are my kingdom of priests." But what did the people do? We do not want any part of that. You can speak through Moses. We elect him to be the kingdom of priests. We're not going to do that. We're just going to stand at a distance. You tell Moses, and then he can tell us. Right? God tried to give them an identity. You are a kingdom of priests, so that all the peoples will hear. And they said, nope, Moses can do that. They rejected that identity that God was trying to give them in order to accomplish this mission. But 1 Peter 2:9. This is a familiar verse. What does this verse say? What does this verse call us? We are now the chosen people, a royal priesthood. Does that sound familiar? Who is he trying to get the Israelites to be? The kingdom of priests. And they rejected it. So now God is calling us that kingdom of priests. His plan has not changed. Whether we reject it or embrace it, God's plan has not changed. So now we are that kingdom of priests, right? And even 2 Corinthians 5, verse 20, I know that we have that verse a little bit later. But in that passage, what does that passage call us? Ambassadors. What does an ambassador do? He represents the country that he is from. He bears the image of the country that he is from. We are ambassadors. We are a kingdom of priests, and we are image bearers. We bear that image of where we come from, of God. He's not changing, is he? Okay. Psalm 67. We sang that. What's the extent? How far-reaching is God's mission as you see it in Psalm 67? All nations. And who is he going to use? us, believers, right? His followers. And Isaiah 49, 5 through 6, the extent, the ends of the earth. And who does he use to reach the ends of the earth here? Who is Isaiah 49 talking about? Jesus. And I love this because he says, for Jesus to die for just Israel, that's not big enough. That's not enough. He's got to die for the ends of the earth, for all nations. That's big enough to send my son to do. That's awesome to me. Aren't you thankful? Because we're the Gentiles that are included in that. Matthew 28, 18 through 20. How far reaching? All the nations, right? And who does he use to do that? Disciples. Disciples, then and now. Acts 1:8. How far reaching? Ends of the earth, right? Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth. And who does he use? Disciples again. Right. So he sent them out, and he told them, Jerusalem, right? Start where you are. Jerusalem was filled at this time with people who had just called for the death of Christ. And that's where they were supposed to start. That would be fun, wouldn't it? This person you just killed. But what happens when they stayed in Jerusalem, they didn't go out into the ends of the earth. So if you don't do Acts 1:8, you get Acts 8:1. What happens in Acts 8:1? Persecution. What happened when God brought persecution? They scattered. And it says that they were spreading the word as they went, right? So if you don't do what God tells you to do, he's going to make sure that you do what he tells you to do. Okay, 2 Corinthians 5, 18 through 20. Who is God reconciling? How far reaching? The world. And who is he using? Us as his ambassadors, right? He has given us the ministry of reconciliation and the message of reconciliation. We are that priest. We're reconciling these people. And then Revelation 7, 9 through 10. How far reaching? Who is represented there?
Every nation, all the tribes, all the peoples, all the languages.
Every nation, every tribe, every people, every language. And how have they gotten there? Who has he used to get them there?
The great multitude that was there.
It's taken all of us, right, to share that story and get them to heaven, get them before the throne, right? So us, yeah. So what is God's mission? To reach the world. Has he changed at all? Through all history and everything that man's done, and even with sin contaminating that multiplication that he first set up in Genesis 1, has he changed his plan? Has he changed how he's going to do it, who he uses? He uses people that believe in him throughout the entire process here, the entire Bible. And there's a lot more verses. For time's sake, we only did a few. But just so you can see from Genesis to Revelation, there is one mission. And you know, the gospel doesn't just save you from hell. It does, that's awesome. But the gospel is an invitation for you to join God in his mission. He wants you to be part of this. That's your purpose. You're a priest, and he wants to use you to do that. Is your heart inclined to do the will of the Father? I want you to just pair up with one other person and just share one takeaway from this exercise. One thing that you learned, or one thing that you're convicted about, or just a takeaway from this exercise. Okay, just take 2 minutes. We'll do that right quick. Thanks.